All right, what's going on, guys? My name's Steven Dexter. I'm your host of the Mass Class podcast. This is our first episode, so we're super excited about that. By we, I mean me. On the other end, I got Chris Navarro with me, who's a good friend of mine. He's also my client. We're just going to kind of have an organic conversation and see where it goes, talk a little bit about training, maybe talk about philosophy. Who knows? But Chris, why don't you introduce yourself and tell me a little bit more about yourself?
Oh man, thank you for having me. It's super exciting. It's so strange. It's a it's cute little date though. I like it. Obviously, my name is Christopher Navarro. 25 years old. I'm a philosophy psychology student at Montana State University. I'm a professional musician. I've been lifting for, poorly for like 3 years and well for about 2 years now. And yeah, that's kind of a good kind of sum up, I suppose.
Awesome. What? So you said you're a professional musician. This isn't a surprise to me because I'm one of your biggest fans. But you guys, so Chris's band Cellar Vessel just released their album Vein Beneath the Soil here in the last 2 months. Is that about right?
Yeah, October, I think.
Yeah, October. And I was lucky enough where I got to preview it. He sent it to me before they released it. And I was fully expecting them to have a kind of a typical college band sound, and it's not. It's absolutely phenomenal. If you are into metal and specific, what genre would you say you're in of metal?
Oddly, and this is a genre I really don't like, but the technical death metal or progressive death metal, it's kind of like a blend of those. Like if Opeth and Gorguts really had a big hard-on for Baroque, that would be about what we sound like.
Cool. So yeah, so Chris is someone who is super into the music scene. He's really talented. Their album blew me away because, like I said, I was expecting a total college band sound from
a 4-track, which is pretty. I mean, it's pretty popular in the genre, anyways. That's some shitty lo-fi, but yeah.
Oh yeah, and it's just like it just blew me away with how high quality it was and how in depth it was, because there was orchestra aspects to it. There was 300 different time signatures you guys played in at one point. It's crazy, and it's all in like how long was it? Like 32 minutes or something like
that?
Only
32. Yeah, it is at 33 minutes, which is, I think, the most impressive part is that synergy that our main composer is the primary one. I, of course, would gift that excellence to, but his ability to weave in and out of different textures and different emotional affects without feeling kind of forced is really unique and really nice. Because most of the time, if someone tells me that they want to have like some orchestra in the metal, I think it's gross and I don't want anything to do with it, because it's very ham-fisted. To be able to have it in something that's more subtle and almost in the background that it becomes revealed through attention, I think is really, really neat, and I'm really proud of having as a component.
Yeah, it was honestly super incredible. I was proud to know you in that moment when it came out, and
I appreciate it.
The other thing that's I think is super cool is that you guys are getting some serious like props from the metal community. It wasn't like you got like 300 streams and that was it. You guys broke 10,000 in the first week or so.
Yeah, 10,000 on Spotify alone. We had 5,000 on Bandcamp. People bought the album. We made over $700, which was a free album, and so that was pretty fucking cool. And because we did expect like our significant others and our friend group and about 30-40 other people would hear it. And so when the streams were just climbing and climbing, it was a really, really unique and awesome experience. And there was blogs that I've been reading since high school that featured one of them featured us as a dark horse contender for death metal album of the year, which was wild because I've been reading this guy's articles and adored his taste for so long that it surprised me that I was associated to art that was that good, because I too expected it to just be like, it's your first album, like no one gives a shit, and you neither. So it was really nice to have that response for sure. And I made money, so I am now a professional.
Is that how it works? Does that?
I think so. I don't know. Maybe you need a record deal. We're working on it.
Yeah, that would be cool. Do you guys have like any are you actively trying to search out a record deal or anything like that?
We've had three different offers, but they're not. We have one label in particular, Seasons of Mist. If for some reason you listen to obscure podcasts, I want you so bad. If you're on Tinder, I would super like you. So we're trying for them, but we screwed the pooch because we released the album and didn't have any promotional work attached to it, and we released the album and didn't have any contacts with it either. And so basically that's letting the cat out of the bag too early, and no one's really interested in it anymore because there's no way to hype it because it already exists. And that was the problem we ran into when we started getting, or around 6,000 streams. We're kind of cool. Maybe people care, and so we hit up some promotional networks that we got from the one of the blogs that wrote about us, and they all responded like, this is fabulous and all that, but it's too late. And so same thing with labels right now, besides the ones, of course, that offered us. But we're kind of enjoying having complete artistic and freedom of time with regard to it. So we're working on an album for next year in August. So we're just going to kind of cruise on that, and then we'll be a little smarter with marketing in the future, hopefully.
Cool. So you guys are planning on another album, but are you trying to, like every artist releases like one track off the album, the track
Sure.
that's the most mainstream, or I guess I don't even know how you would do that with the kind of metal that you play, that like kind of Baroque death metal, where
Sure.
it's like you can't release the most mainstream song on the album because that's not what the people like in the genre,
Totally. Yeah. I think there's still, there's always this deep obsession with homogeneity for any people, right? So even like an underground music scene still has like particular traits that are, I don't want to use the word generic to devalue it, but are typical, right? Are standard. And so I think the way to do it in our genre is to just pick those ones that are more standard, things that have, either something incredibly unique, which might be a bad idea because then maybe it's the most unique part of your album and you oversold your album. Then expectations are too high, you don't deliver. Or having that one that's just kind of almost run of the mill. And I find that to be the case with most singles that get released in the genre. I'm usually the singles bore me and the album's great is what happens with a lot of the bands that I like. So I assume that's kind of how you go about it because everything has a norm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even people trying to break the norm become defined by it circularly at some point.
What do you mean by that?
I guess so obviously we see it with like philosophy of science, or we see it in grade averages and everything like that. But we're really interested in probabilities and averages of probabilities because that might be a strong thing to say, but the truth as a big T, as a singular entity out there in the world, isn't really existing at any point in time. It's something that we can come across and we can say that we observe it continually and repeatedly again and again, right? And so that's what I mean in terms of like there's always a norm with something, because anytime you start searching, even in kind of transgressive art, that transgression has to be defined by some sort of work or play that exists outside of it that it's attempting to kind of separate itself from. And so that creates a normalcy point right there for itself. And then itself will have things that recur and repeat because, we like patterns as people. So as like a broader statement, that's what I
Gotcha.
mean. But
No,
that's just my opinion. Lots of people, would disagree with that kind of instantiation of like truth and things like that. So.
cool. How long you guys have been? You told me when we were driving back from the Thousand Buddhas out here in over just past Missoula, but you were telling me that you guys had, because I thought you had started this band pseudo recently, and you just
Right.
were like, no, we had been playing, and this album was something that you guys had been in the make for like 5 years or something longer.
Yeah, it felt like a dragged out divorce at the time. It's been so long with like no progress. But yeah, we started it. I was 15. I was hanging out in Cold Smoke, as a local coffee shop here in Bozeman, and a guy had a oxymoronic Craigslist ad of calling all introverted musicians, which is kind of hard to be a musician and be introverted, kind of other people. It's like that's cute. And so I clicked on it, and it had like Emperor and Dissection because he was really into black metal at the time. I still am. He's not anymore. And I saw that, and I was like, oh, this is fabulous. So we shot emails back and forth together, played that day. And then him and I played together for 3 years, just him and I in our little storage unit. And we never intended to release anything. We never intended to play live or tour or anything like that. It was just like we made art for us, and it was fun, and was rewarding, and we left it at that. But after 3 years, we had a referral for a possible vocalist, who was Dario Scotto from the band. And we brought him in and kind of realized that there was a potential for something more excellent than we had previously thought of. And that's when we started kind of putting things into motion. So that was 3 years of playing kind of solo. I had another 2 years with Dario, and then a year with Dario. And then we had a couple live shows that we played. One with Ghost Bath. It was their first show ever. If anyone listens to metal, you'll know of them. Probably hate them. I think they're phenomenal. And they wanted to kind of try out some vibe and mood settings for live shows and stuff. And so before their first stop in Washington, they did a secret show here at the Zebra, which was super fun because I was a huge fan of the band at the time. And so I got to play that show with them. That was really great. And they did some other ones at Billings and a couple here. And then we all scattered across the country at that time. And the album still wasn't finished. So after another year and a half, it was a year and a half, when around March of the lockdown here in Bozeman for us is when ours happened. Coincidentally, one in Oregon was going on at the same time. And so all of us started talking again because we're bored. There's nothing else to do. And we started kind of kicking around the idea and kind of just left it alone. And then all of a sudden, the main composer, Jake, sent us an email with a kind of a master mix of one of the songs. And then it kind of restarted our love for it all over again. And so that finished fairly quickly. That was only like a 7-month process. But the recording itself, I recorded those drums when I was 19. I was 19. So they're kind of a historical timestamp for me, which is really fun.
So the drums on the album that you just did, you're 25, 24? 25.
24.
24. You did those drums that are on the album that you released 2 months ago, 5 years ago?
Yeah.
Oh, that's super funny. That's awesome.
Yeah. It was a long time ago. So, which is wild to me, which means that the band has been going for much longer than just 5 years. So, yeah, I didn't realize since I was 15. So 10, it's been almost 10 years that this one fucking album is taken.
Jeez, that's insane. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's quite the event. 35 minutes for 10 years. It's a bit like bodybuilding when you think about it, because you spend, 6-8 years building a decent physique, and you go on stage for 5 minutes to someone to tell you that, your fucking glutes are soft, and then you gotta go back. You see you in another 2 years. It's a very small payoff.
Yeah. Have I ever told you about the first and only time I ever played a gig?
No, I thought you never made it. I
was 16, and luckily none of our music ever made it anywhere, and it never got recorded, and it was done. But we played at this bar called Anchors Up in I want to say it was in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. I'm from Boston originally, as you know, but and I was 16. I was in a band called Broken Glass, and which we later changed after we did this show, and then we had like one more meetup, and then we just never played ever again. And yeah, so, it was bad. It was really bad. Yeah. You're gonna cringe really hard when I get into the actual story. But to not take up a ton of time, the band was already together. It was with one of my buddies. The band came over when I was at their house because he had forgot they had practice. And we were happening to playing music anyway while we were there. So he's just like, why don't you guys just sit in and jam? And so I just sit in and we played. And you know how everything sounds better when you're in a basement and you can't hear anything clearly.
Oh, yeah. Everything's reverberating. You feel it in your chest.
Yeah, it's like it doesn't sound good, but it sounds loud and exciting. And that's kind of what is fun about it. Yeah, and so the lead singer and the guitarist are like, dude, you have to come play with us. Like, that sounded great. We'll just we'll send you we'll basically give you the sheet music for the songs, which wasn't sheet music. They called it sheet music, but it was the handwritten chord progression. It wasn't sheet music. God. So I just had the chord progression, and for all the songs. I didn't know any of it at all, and for some reason, I still thought it was a good idea to join them for this gig.
Oh,
And
that's
so,
cool.
and so anyway, we opened up for this band called Rat Trap, I think was what it was
Okay.
called, and we kind of played like, like light metal, hard punk, somewhere in that vicinity of trash noise that we were making. Not that those genres are trash. I love both of those genres. Just we are trash, And so, anyway, long story short, when we played, it was at a packed bar. I had to have my mom sign a permission slip for me to be there.
Yeah.
Because I was 16. I wasn't allowed to be in there if I was under 18. So my mom had to be there. And, so we had, and I wasn't the only one under 18. I think our singer Joe and the lead guitarist Kevin were the only two over 18, and the rest of us were like 17, 16, and 15.
Oh man.
Yeah, it was just bad. My friend Kia ended up getting a concussion because she was in the mosh pit. No one moshed when we were playing. It was just when the actual band was playing.
Gotcha.
And I just remember we got off and no one said anything to us. No one was like, good job, like even lied about it.
Right. Just let it.
Yeah, they were just like, we're just not going to talk about it. And in the car ride home, my buddy Fergus, just like, we're kind of quiet. And he's like, dude, we sucked. And he was not wrong. Yeah, it was a whole thing. And I look back on it fondly, and there are some pictures of us playing on Facebook where you can see like clearly everyone's in the background just like, what is going on? So it was real bad.
That's funny. I mean, of all the things to do at 15, that's not so bad. That's a fun memory. At the time, I'm sure it was.
Yeah, well, I don't even remember being embarrassed about it or anything because I didn't write any of the songs. I mean, I didn't even know the names of any of the songs. Like it was like I practiced with them 2 times before I decided it was a good idea to get on stage with them.
Dear God, I couldn't do it, man. Yeah. How did you feel prior to getting on stage? Were you confident?
Yeah, I was fine. I was like not worried about it at all.
God, jeez.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that came from just I was in a like band in middle school and high school, and so I not saying that helped me play guitar or anything because I played trumpet.
Sure, stage fright. Yeah.
But I was I had been in plays. I had been doing that in high school. I was in another band in high school, and we performed at like assemblies and little things like that. And so I was super comfortable on stage. But I was comfortable, but I shouldn't have been. That was the problem, because I didn't we had like a 6-song set, like pretty quick. It was all punk, so it was under like 2-minute songs. We were in and off stage in like 15 minutes.
That's a good thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It was super good. Because if we had like tried to drawn out like a 35, 40-minute set, people probably would have started throwing shit at us.
Yeah. That's when you kind of overextend their patience or their grace a little bit.
Yeah. But like what you said with the whole bodybuilding thing is like that for me was kind of like when people start lifting 6 months in, see their first bicep brain, and are like, shit, yeah, I'm going to compete. That's what I did.
I can see their Instagram post already. Hey, guys, hitting you with another great shoulder workout.
Yeah. Here's my 17th set of front raises.
Honestly, I was watching YouTube the other day, and no hate for this. In fact, I'm impressed by this. But he is an individual who looks like they haven't lifted before. I don't mean that in the meme way. Just a standard, Gen Pop, 5'10" guy, and he's going on like great tips for bulking. And the guy has no like physique or development or anything. It had 70,000 views, and I'm like, dear God, I couldn't even find a bicep vein. But bless him for.
Well, then the bulk is going good.
Honestly, yeah, he's doing it. So that's something else. But I do see that a lot with your first, and I guess there's some sort of, I don't know. I've seen some memes from Dr. Mike on it, but this kind of like curve where you think that you first start something, you think you're phenomenal, you're going to go so incredibly far, you hit that mid slump, You get out of that and think maybe I still have a shot. It's not a for sure thing. It's like I have a shot. And then after the end, you just have existential crisis after existential crisis. But you're actually excellent by this point. And I think that probably represents your experience well. Our friend on YouTube, except he actually is successful. So I can't really talk shit on that.
Dude, I'm having existential crises about bodybuilding, and I still don't even look like I fucking lift, as far as I'm concerned. You know what I mean? Like, it's.
Oh, I get that. I wake up every morning and I'm sure a lot of people relate to this, but you wake up and there's that half second of peace, and then the rest of your problems from yesterday or the day hit you, and you're like, oh boy, life's great for most of us in the West Coast, but life's not so great. I have the same thing with my physique in the morning too. Well, I'll get up and I'll look in the mirror, and the first thing I see, especially now, is my waist coming in so much smaller from kind of being on this. I think we're in 10 weeks of dieting, I think now.
Yeah, because we did 5 weeks, and then we took a maintenance, and then so actually we might not even 8. It actually hasn't. Yeah. Maybe it's only been
16 pounds, so we've done well. But so our waist looks great, and then that's my little second of bliss, and then I get to go everywhere else, and have that boy howdy, there's a lot of hours to look like this, and I think everyone has that for the most part. And I think it's really ingrained in. Not only, I think it was likely better in, golden era or 90s, because the magazines were something that were almost ethereal and disconnected from you. And competitions were something that were rarer or just happened, in season, and then you're kind of out of it. But with social media, your continuity is within the app itself. So you're posting all your progress and whatnot, and you're having all the judgment that gets to come across with it, and you're getting to see all the freaks and the phenoms in the sport, and the sport is growing, exponentially. So we're getting more people that maybe would have been, athletes previous. Not that bodybuilding isn't athletic, but they're not a sport, right?
Actually, that's a good point. Do you think bodybuilding's a sport?
Oh no, definitely not. Not bodybuilding, right? So lifting weights as an accruement of a skill set, and having for most of us a prescribed training plan and following that. Those are athletic traits, right? The characteristics, and you need athletic traits in the sport. But I think the sport happens at the competition period itself. And that, I don't mean that to say as a gatekeeping way, you're not a bodybuilder if you don't compete. You're totally a bodybuilder. You're changing your physique if you don't compete. But I mean in terms of an actual where you're showing your product, right? At the end of a training camp for MMA, you show your product in the octagon, right? Or off season for football, you're showing that on the field. We would show that then on the stage. And the stage doesn't have athletic qualities when we're on it. There might be some aspects of breath control and these psychological phenomena of kind of being in the zone and being able to be focused, or flow, or flow state, or all those sorts of things. But we're not performing a trait really at that point. We're showing something, and we're showing it in a state where you probably couldn't fight out of a wet paper bag if you wanted to. You're dehydrated, you're starving, you're probably cramping up. You have weird so
all sorts of fun stuff.
Oh, it's brutal. And I haven't been there, so I don't even truly know the suffering of it.
Yeah.
But, watching people and their fatigue levels as they go through it, there's certainly something to be said. But yeah, I don't think it's a sport, and I don't think that devalues it at all. But I think it's important to kind of be precise with language. But what do you think?
I've actually had this conversation with one of my not really my friend, but a friend of a friend who I chat with on Instagram from now and then. And she posted this thing about being someone said that bodybuilding isn't a sport to one of her coaching clients, and she went off on a little bit of, I wouldn't say a rant or anything like that, because it wasn't that. It was just her defending her position of believing it was a sport. And I think it was, and so I mentioned to her something that I heard actually Alberto Nunez say, that if anything, bodybuilding's like a dog pageant.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's like you have to train your dog. They have to have the perfect haircut. They have to have all these preparations, and then on top of that, it's basically a genetics competition. And I was like, that's that's pretty accurate, And so the actual definition of a sport, and the reason I bring it up is because because during this conversation I was having with this girl, I bothered to look up the definition of a sport, and it's like basically anything that you do for fun. It was like it was super. It was
Oh,
like
it
had
doesn't even
very
require
little
like a
requirement.
competitive aspect.
No, I think
Oh,
I think you might have had to compete,
okay,
but it didn't say you had to be on a team. It didn't say it had to be athletic. Like it was bar none. It was like chess could be a sport, video games could be a sport.
okay,
I think it was like anything that you competed in could be a sport. I
I see.
I this was a while ago, so I'd have to double check, and I'm not
Oh,
gonna pause to go do that right now. But it was something like that, and
yeah, yeah.
I just remember seeing that and being like, "Holy crap!" Like anything can be considered a sport, but then like to me, I wouldn't say I wouldn't call myself a bodybuilder or a power lifter or a strongman like if I didn't compete in any of those things,
For
right?
sure. Same.
Why I
Yeah.
would call myself a strongman. I've never competed in strongman. You know what I mean? It's like to me, it's would you call yourself a football player if you only play fat flag football once a month on the weekend with the boys? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like it's
I
to me,
agree.
you know, it's kind of funky. So I like the term bodybuilder for people who are like obsessed with like building a physique or
Yeah.
whatever. But the idea of being a bodybuilder to me is that you have to be competitive. You have to be competing or have competed, or at least planning to compete.
Totally.
At least if you wanted to be considered a bodybuilder. But that
Yeah.
brings up the question, what are you if you know you don't want to do that? Because there's so many downsides to competing, you know,
Absolutely.
I what if you don't want your dick to stop working for 4 months, you know?
Yeah.
I wouldn't blame you, dude, you know? So
Yeah,
it's
for
like
sure.
I don't know. It's a funny
I don't
line
know.
to cross.
And I think you kind of maps onto something interesting, and maybe a phrase that I think I use the phrase inappropriately. Now it's like, oh, like be precise with language, but the precise language is that it is indeed a sport. But it seems that there's kind of like two instances of conditioning with this word, right, a sport that's going on here. There's my initial bias where I want to devalue bodybuilding in a way almost, because not that I don't love the sport and the activity and don't want to compete, because I deeply do and don't want to improve, but I get really cringy about a lot of the go to war, brother, when I'm going to an air conditioned gym kind of stuff. And so I want to be like, no, it's just a fun thing that I do. And that's conditioning the word. But also, like you just said, what do you call someone who very reasonably doesn't want to put their health on the line or put kind of time that can be spent with family meaningfully? If the food is a meaningful way that you share time with others, they don't want to put that on the line. I'm not trying to devalue them by not using the word either. So there's a really fun conflict that's kind of occurring there with regard to like, what do you call them? I've always just been like, oh no, I just like to go to the gym once in a while. Like I keep like my interest, which is funny because I wear like some fucking medium shirt, and then I'll be like, oh, I don't really want to tell you. So obviously, I do want to tell people somewhat, but I'm trying not to kind of talk it up, right? I'm trying to actually talk it down. But I wouldn't want to do that if someone came to me and was really excited about it. I would never tell them like you're not a bodybuilder, you didn't compete. Like I can't tell anyone shit about anything beyond maybe some nutrition stuff,
Mm.
and some like pharmacokinetics, pharmacology kind of basics. So I don't know. That's a tough question. Like, what do you call someone? I would say you would call them a bodybuilder, but I still wouldn't call them an athlete. For the how Albert described it. You know what I mean? Because maybe sure the general definition is something that's incredibly large, but the social definition that we've all agreed on by determining like this has a difference from something else, right? These things are different and distinct, and so we call it this word. I don't think that the average population would really kind of look at it as a sport either. God knows what the average population thinks of it. Nothing great, obviously. There's lots of things not to like
Oh
looking
yeah.
at it from the outside.
I mean, every time I'm like, I mean, you know, my girlfriend will always, you know, say things like, you know, this is the most, you know, you just have to be so into yourself to want to
Oh,
be a
totally.
bodybuilder. Right?
Yeah.
You just have to, which is funny because I think the most fragile group of people I've ever met are bodybuilders. You know, they're as into themselves as they can be, but at the same time, they're like one criticism away from never going back to the gym. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
for sure. Yeah.
Like,
Or like revamping their entire everything. You know what I mean? Yeah.
yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, like it does not take much to talk someone into, you know, changing their entire belief system when it comes to like lifting weights. Like you get someone who's like doing a bulk and someone says, oh, looks like you're losing muscle, man, because, you know, all of a sudden their veins are gone because they went up 2 pounds of water. And you know, there's one person I think of who I know from an old town I used to live in, who, you know, has been within the same, you know, 5 or 10 pounds, you know, for the last like 3 years of their training. And without diverging from that, which is, you know, is fine. But for someone like them who is like training in order to compete someday and be really competitive, you know, it's not really the most effective way of training, right? You know, and it's probably because they're so famous, loose term, but you know, they have a really big following on Instagram, a big following on TikTok, you know, like they have this, you know, thriving social aspect that is completely derived from how they look. So I feel like it's going to hinder this person's progress, like long-term progress, because they'll never be comfortable stepping out of that really tight, you know, 9 to 12% body fat limit, you know, and this person's probably around 10 all the time, you know, when they mass go up 3 pounds over the course of 2 months and then they feel like they need to diet again.
Jesus, that's crazy. I can't imagine, like, once you kind of initiate that process, you start getting a little fuller, your glycogen stores start filling up, your performance then is in a place to start increasing, to really see some sort of overload. I feel like you're just really cutting it short. And I can't imagine what it takes to be 10% year round. Not only as far as time and diet, but kind of how you would feel constantly. And that's a hard expectation. That's a big expectation to have on yourself at all points, because there's already a big kind of cruelty, not in the like hardcore way, but in the sense of like, whatever I have now isn't good enough. And so I have to make it better. And when I make it better, that still won't be good enough. There's a cruelty in art that is similar to bodybuilding, in that it's consistent, constant progression that denies and deflates and devalues the previous progression as a almost in most cases as a requirement kind of for the activity. So coupling that, you have all the insecurity that comes with having to show yourself to people constantly for that economic validation in his case, or in our case, just being sad little men. Mixing all that in with the expectation of altering your health and the fatigue that comes with it and everything else would be tiring. But, you know, there are some really phenomenal opportunities for, you know, Instagram famous people. We use it as a term to make fun of people a lot, but you can do a lot of really cool things if you have the following for it. You can get a lot of really cool connections. So maybe it's worth it to him. Hopefully.
Yeah, that's a super valid point. I mean, you see it all the time. The people who tend to do the best on Instagram don't get above 12 or 13% body fat. You know, like they are, you know, the people who do the lean bulks that never actually end up being a bulk. That being said, a lot of those people who are that prevalent on Instagram are, you know, using, you know, steroids that allow you to be leaner, you know, year round and still make progress. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you
can
take
a shitload of photos and have them stored for the year while you go.
I think a lot,
if you're competing.
For sure. I think a lot of people do that.
Thank God for Throwback Thursdays for competitors, so they can show that, you know?
Oh my God. One of the reasons, so I did a photo shoot with one of my good friends before I moved to Missoula, like I think it was a little over a year, maybe 2 years ago. And one of the reasons I wanted to do that photo shoot was because I had competed the year or two before. I had done a really long bulk and I was I hadn't had aesthetics in quite some time, and
Totally.
I did a mini cut, like a 6 week, pretty harsh diet. I went from like 220 down to like 204 or something in
Mhm.
6 weeks, um, which wasn't that bad. And But I remember at the end of it, I was just like, I need to do something because like I'm not like unless I want to stay this lean, which for me was probably like 12%, something like that. Not crazy lean by any
Sure.
means. But I was like, but this isn't, the most efficient place for me to stay if
Sure.
I want to progress. So I was like, I'm just gonna do a photo shoot while I'm down here. And one of my buddies had offered to do it for free, and he was gonna use some of the photos for like, trying to promote his photography thing, which for him didn't really end up going anywhere, but it was still a really awesome experience. And now I have some cool photos to look back on, that made me look absolutely jacked, even though they're so far gone now that, that shrimp boy that was in those photos is, 4 or 5 pounds of muscle less than where I am now. But I just look
Totally.
chunky. So it's like, yeah, it's whatever.
Yeah, it doesn't look as good, right? Yeah, for sure. I've just recently gotten over that where you're still fat, but you're also flat period.
Fat and
And I'm
flat. Yeah.
experiencing the like, you're like, man, maybe I did grow muscle. It's pretty unlikely considering some of the variables, but it's possible. But like, you just look that much bigger because your lines are clean and everything. So I agree. And I think it's smart and more people should. Like, I'm planning on having, after, we go back to maintenance once we finish this or whatever, I plan on taking photos and having some side by side stuff just because I know I'm not going to look that good for another year to 2 years. I don't want to either because, like you said, there's
Mhm.
no progress there, anyways. So I don't see any reason not to. And I think people should because it's really nice to be able to be proud and look back on something you did. Because in 3 years, you can have another photo shoot. And like you said, the shrimp boy will now have ascended even further, and I think that's fun.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, um, like allowing yourself those moments to be proud of what you've built over time. Um,
Totally.
and actually, kind of in a different trajectory. I think that's one of my favorite parts about doing kind of the massing with mini cuts sprinkled in, um, is is that you kind of get to come down and see what your physique looks like,
Mhm.
but you're never getting to the point where you're like potentially sacrificing lean mass. You know what I mean? Because, you're still staying, north of 10% body fat, and I'm not saying that's a hard cut line where people
Sure.
start using lean mass. There's tons of dumb shit you can do at 15% that'll cost you lean body mass, and 20%, you can just not eat protein and eat only fats and you will lose all of your muscle. I guarantee it,
Oh,
but
totally. That
yeah.
rave you go to for 3 days and eat nothing but a fucking Adderall. It's like you're gonna, no matter what body fat you're at,
Yeah,
you're
you're
gonna see some lost air, whatever.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, you know, I I appreciate dieting more when I've been massing hard for a while. Like
Absolutely.
the first I mean, you told me when we first started your cutting phase, like you were I mean, first off, you got to start your cutting phase at like 600 grams of carbs.
Yeah, it was
Like
wild.
your first like 6 pounds came off and you were still like north of 4,000 calories,
I still
you
struggle
know?
to get the food in. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was, yeah, you were like, hey, I accidentally underate like these 3 days. And I was like, dude, you're cutting. Like, it's
That's
okay.
fine.
you
Yeah.
know, you know? But yeah, and it's the other thing that's wild to me is how people's metabolism adapt, you know, because I mean, you and me both end up, you were massing on, I want to say just north of 700 grams of carbs at one point,
It
right?
got up to 750 at the
Yeah.
peak.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you were
which
at,
is wild for my size. It's unheard of. I spoke with Evil Genius very briefly, Broderick Chavez, I believe. Yeah,
yeah,
and
Chowder.
he literally was like, "I'm gonna choose to believe you, but I don't. I don't think you eat that." And I was like, "I get it. I don't either, but it's on the sheet." Like,
I promise.
yeah, I have the scale everywhere. I get made fun of for it very often. Like I eat all this, for sure. So it was a crazy amount to what we're at now, 350 grams of carbs, which is still a lot. really in the grand scheme of things, outside of, when I'm working, I'm having some cold sweats and shaky a little bit. But once I can have my pre-workout meal that has a big bolus of carbs, I'm still really in a pretty comfy spot. I go to bed a little hungry. It's kind of whatever. So
Yeah.
this is a big adaptation, but not as, not as
It's not,
destructive.
you're still not wild. It's not like
No.
wild. People, one of the things that like drives me bonkers is that all the people who show what they eat in a day are never showing their low days. You know what I mean? They're never
Yeah.
like, most people aren't showing the days where it's like, yeah, guys, today I'm at, like for me, for example, I finished up a little cut here recently too. And I had a low day, and granted, like I am very, very far away from being lean. I'm probably in the solid teens somewhere. And I found that for me to get down to around 208, which is where I start looking, I've got some cool striations. I've got, sitting abs all the time. I've got some cool leg like things come out. But, I'm probably not even Instagram lean at that point. You know what I mean? And I had low days on my non-training days where I was having 170 grams of carbs. I had sub 2,000 calorie days to get there. Granted, right now I'm super sedentary just because of things that are going on, and I still can't find a job right now. But so it's like I don't have a whole lot of things that are getting me up and moving other than like going and walking the dog. But I mean, even that, it's like hard for me to break, that 6,000 to 8,000 step a day mark. So that, other than training, it's like the only kind of things I do. But it's wild because I found myself sharing what I would eat like on my highest carb days, because I would have a low carb day, kind of a moderate, and then a higher carb day. And the only reason I did that was because I was messing with the RP Diet app, and I had my my lower body sessions labeled as the hardest training day, my upper body session training as a moderate, and then I had my rest day. And with that app, which I'm not saying I necessarily agree with this as a whole, but it modulates your food intake based on those variables. So
right.
And so, yeah, I had like on my higher carb days, I was having like, 395 carbs, something like that, close to 400. And then on my lowest day, I was at 170. And which I think,
yeah, it's surprising because like Jared Feather just recently was preaching about how having consistent days, not having these highs and lows, were something he thought was beneficial in his prep. So I wonder if it's a Gen Pop thing, if they like feeling hungry to feel like they're making progress, and then we pull it back so they don't build up a ton of fatigue, and the cycle continues.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's exactly that. I think for which it's kind of a little wonky when you think about it, because exercise, when you're producing lactate, it does have some kind of appetite blunting effect that we know about. Or at least that's what like the literature is starting to point out, that lactate has this appetite blunting effect, which is why most people, like I personally am never hungry after I train legs, like for like 2 hours. Like I can get a protein shake down and I'm just dead, So like on my, when I'm peak mass, I have to be drinking Gatorade the whole session because it's the only way I'll get, any of my carbs in. But it's kind of funny that on the day you're not training and you're not doing all that, that appetite suppressing bouts of exercise, which tends to come with like higher intensity training, you are the days that you're going lower. So you're hungrier on the days that you're lower and you're doing lower. I don't know. For me, like I liked my experience with the RP Diet app was pretty good. It worked pretty well. It was, I have to say, it was very easy. It took a lot of the guesswork out. And plus, like, it's always nice when you're paying for something because you like see, you're like, my bank account's going down. Probably should use that.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think that's why a lot of
buy-in effect.
Yeah, and that's why a lot of people do so well when they get coaches. It's not necessarily that they're learning anything super new, but they have someone there that they know they're going to talk to at the end of the week, or if it's me and you, every day, baby, because we just like to chat. But
we're just cool people. I can't help it.
Yeah, just two handsome boys. But stop. Um, but yeah,
Cam's
it's like,
over there like, what the hell are they doing? It's
what
only
kind of
Cam. Cam,
podcast
it's fine.
is this?
It's fine. Don't worry about it.
Go sit down. But um, but it's, yeah, like you said, it's that buy-in aspect. People
Yeah,
want
definitely.
to, you know, like if I'm paying for something, I'm gonna use it. And that's something that I think is fair for most people. I mean, I think that's
Yeah.
a lot of the rationale that people use with like supplements.
Oh,
They're
certainly.
like, if I go spend $200 on supplements, well, maybe it'll make me not eat like an asshole this week.
Oh yeah.
It's like, I get it.
And I know, you and I know people who they go and buy their SARMs or whatever online, and the efficacy of those things are in debate, et cetera, et cetera, to talk about. But the thing that they do on that is that they start being consistent and they show up every day and they're not going out with the boys drinking because they're on cycle now, brother. And they kind of pull their variables in a little bit more and they see all this progress and then they think to themselves like, well, obviously it was this, when they don't realize not to have a little self-help seminar. It was inside you all along. It was just the consistency, and it brought it out.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
the same
no,
thing with supplements.
that's
There's lots of
an amazing point. I mean, that's it, like that to a T. And it blow. The other thing with SARMs just in general is like my personal opinion, just take gear. We have
it's
so much research on it. We know what's going to happen.
totally
Like
agree.
you can, and the other thing with gear is you can tell a doctor what you took, and they'll have information on what's going on, right? If you tell them you took this SARM from this website, first off, we don't have the information on the SARMs. Secondly, most SARMs don't even have the thing in it that you think it does. Most SARMs, they just put some low-grade steroid in, and
Yeah,
that's
you
it.
might have
It's cheaper and
Dianabol in there,
yeah,
and your blood pressure's through the roof, and you can't figure out why. You're holding a ton of water, but you would never think that, and the doctor's never going to think that. You
yeah.
know,
I worked with someone who decided to use SARMs, and his body weight shot up like 12 pounds in the first 2 weeks or something. And
impressive.
I was kind of on that spectrum. I was like, I'm not certain what you're taking is what you think you're taking, because you
Yeah,
clearly just put on 12 pounds of water and glycogen, and like last time I checked, that's not a SARM, baby. You know what I mean? Like,
no, I think I
like
think
I don't
some of
know.
the ones I've seen are around like 5 to 6 with the what is it Rad 40 that's strong? No, I can't remember. It doesn't matter. It's
Yeah,
not worth
I
talking
mean,
about.
you
But
know me.
yeah,
Yeah. It's wild to me that people will, if you're, in my opinion, if you're gonna dive in, you might as well dive in. Like,
yeah,
you're like with actual like androgenic compounds that we know work. You just use some test or something, and
I
like
agree. Yeah.
because
I think there's some arguments for like, oh well, the suppressive effects aren't as strong for SARMs, which is true if you actually get them. Which if you did, like kudos to you, that's really awesome. But like you said, the safety efficacy or the risk to reward ratio is so unknown and so vastly wild, different for people that it doesn't seem like it's a good trade. But we want to feel, we do this with dating and we do this with restaurants, with Yelp reviews, and we do this with really anything. We want to dip our toe in the water and feel like if it goes bad, I can pull back. But as soon as you start messing around with the physiology, there isn't going back. You will change things permanently and not completely, but you will express epigenetics different traits for the rest of your life, whether good or bad, or you may have testicular shutdown that you will like. Oh God, what was the study where they had males come off testosterone replacement and every single one recovered in 12 months? So you will come back, but are you going to come back to your baseline? What's your quality of life for those 12 months? There's all those things that you have to consider when you want to dip your toe in the water. Or you can choose something that has incredibly vast amounts of anecdotal and medical literature and know your risks, know your rewards, and weigh them and get in and get out. I think so. I totally agree with you. I don't understand it. Actually, I do, because we all want our cake and eat it too, right? We all want to have something that's going to get us jacked and lean and shredded, but isn't going to take years off our life. But being jacked and lean and shredded takes years off your life. So you should probably get over that long before you even think about using gear. Not to make it like a martyr sport at all, but you're not doing something that's healthy. Most, natural bodybuilding, I think you still
I
can.
mean, do
But
you even think
competing,
that?
not
Yeah.
competing though. No, no, no,
Yeah,
no.
that's where
Yeah.
the line is, right?
I mean, people who lift and track their diet and look good naturally, but they stay above, 8 to 10% kind of thing. But yeah, competing naturally too. If you like Stan Efferding, if you want to be healthy, don't compete. Like totally. And there's nothing wrong with making that trade for having experiences and memories and forming friendships and using this as an avenue and a springboard to have something that when you're dying you can look back on as favorable and memorable. Like I think that's a super worthy trade-off. But why have why make those years all for really no gain in new songs? That's the kind of the closing of or the take home message of that rant. Like, don't whoever's listening, if you're using it, stop it. If you're thinking about it, don't do it. You could probably the amount of people I've talked to, they're like, I don't really like, I'm hitting like I talked to one gentleman recently. He's 230 pounds, ex-Marine, brilliant. He's incredibly smart, one of the smartest guys I know. He blew through OChem and didn't study. And he's trying to get bigger and all these sorts of things. And he's eating 120 grams of protein a day. And he wants to hop on gear. And I was like, dude, if you put your protein up to recommended intake, was it 1 point?
1 gram per pound is like
Yeah.
which is, you could even argue that could be a little bit high because
Yeah,
if you're like 40% body fat, that's outrageous. I know Dr. Eric Helms, his like kind of cheat code is doing 1 gram per your height in centimeters, which which I think is probably makes a bit more sense, especially for naturals. That being said, for natural people within that average genetics kind of area, because if you're my height in centimeters is 188. I think that's 6'1" in centimeters. And that would be I think that would be a little low for me, just because I mean right now I'm like 215. It might not be low. I guess it also depends on like carb intake, and if you're counting your your carb, the proteins that come with your carbs, like rice, beans, whole grains, that sort of thing, towards your protein. Because I mean, I set my protein purposely higher because when I'm massing, my carbs get up, similar to you, get into that 7 to 900 range. I've been as high as 1060 before. And, but that was when I was like, working manual labor at the same time.
Yeah.
Made a little sense.
Both of us really have a neat driver. It's not that we sit around and just radiate heat. Thank God for our significant others. But yeah, no, I agree that depending on carb intake, not to get rabbit trailed, but there are we go through trends in the industry. And when I first started lifting, there was a big trend, at least for people that I was observing, the Dave Palumbo and stuff, where you only track the protein from your complete protein sources and not from incomplete, right? And it's kind of swung over. That was really high protein, style was and in vogue. And now there's a lot of guys, Patrick Ford and Justin Harris, and I keep talking about them because I like following them and their clients. They're great. But they talk about how protein is overused, is very difficult on the digestive tract, is very expensive, and all these sorts of things. And increase, like I said, carb intake relative. That performance increase is something you get more determinatively than you get from protein, and it's all these fabulous effects because maybe you don't need as much as you initially thought you did. And maybe in the off season, taking into account that lean mass, can you get that without hydrostatic weight? Probably not. So just do the gram per pound thing because it makes it easy. But I think that it's definitely overused. Not in the case of the gentleman I was talking about previously. His is underused. Getting it up to adequate levels would probably be like taking steroids. It would probably be wild.
Yeah, he would probably explode.
Yes. Yeah, he's very athletic. He is someone who could do very, and he has a lot of muscle now. He's a big boy. It's not 220 flabby. He thinks he's flabby, but he's pretty stocky. So imagine what you do with kind of treating variables, right? But yeah, not to rabbit trail so hard, but I definitely think that protein is a lot like fat for me, where you just set it to your what you need, and don't maybe you need a little more for compliance. That's a fabulously fine need, but why don't go on the extremes of it.
Yeah. Something I find personally is that Yeah, not to beat the dead horse here, but when you do have those absurdly high carb intakes that you might have at the end of a mass or at the maybe even the very beginning of a diet, like if I was to use that Eric Helms rule of 188 grams of protein, but I'm in the end of my mass and I'm having 800 grams of carbs or 700 grams of carbs, of that 188 grams of protein, probably like 80 to 90 grams of that is going to be like incomplete proteins, right?
Yeah.
And then I'm only getting about 100 grams of complete protein. So to me, it makes sense that, especially just to make it easier on yourself, is just to bring protein up as your carbs go up in a massing phase, but have like you said, have a threshold like your fats where you just like don't go below it. Like
Yeah.
for me, like even if I was, sub 10% body fat, I'd probably like keep my protein up like around 200 would probably be the lowest, even though I probably would be like stage weight around 185 to 190, so like
Gotcha.
I just have that buffer zone. So that way, like, worst case scenario is like, you miss out on 10 or 15 grams of carbs, like,
Right. But how much
is
satiety do you get from having something chewy and flavorful from like a protein source? I think that's a fine trade.
Yeah, I think
You
so
know.
too. And it definitely gets a little bit more nitty gritty when you get super lean. But I think as a whole, setting your protein to, a very good range for where you are. And I think for like 99% of people, 1 gram per pound is probably fine. 99% of active training people, because,
Yeah.
most likely they're in that, healthy body fat range or maybe even a little leaner. So like you're probably safe there,
Mm.
but when you're like pushing 20-25%, that's when you should probably round down instead of up.
Yes, that's how I feel too with when people who are kind of out of shape ask me for that protein count. I always shoot a little under too.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the other thing is like, we can't really talk about carbs and protein without talking about fats. And the one thing that I see a lot of people do, is they, I don't know where this came from, but someone once told me back in when like my freshman year of college that you couldn't digest protein without having fat. And I don't
Interesting.
know. Yeah, I don't know where it came
I've
from.
never heard that one.
Yeah,
That's unique.
I heard it that one time, and you hear something once, and you're like, "Oh, that's fucking true," and you just run with it. I ran with that for like a year until I was like, "Wait, that's not how it works at all." And then, but I saw that recently. I saw someone had posted on their Instagram story that you needed like fats to digest protein, which, let's be clear,
Okay.
not the case. But it's I like it's funny how these like fallacies just pop up,
Oh,
and
yeah,
it's
just
like
go
it
with
only
it. Yeah.
takes one person you trust to tell you something that they didn't fact check for you to be like, yeah, why wouldn't that be true?
Oh, totally.
You know?
I remember I was working with Remington, you know him,
Hmm.
and I was working and I said something really stupid about only being able to digest 25 grams of protein per meal. I don't know where I got it from. I
Eight
don't know
meals a day,
why.
dude.
Yeah, you fucking easy. And the look he gave me is ingrained in my face, and it comes up for me when I think about needing. "Nah, maybe I should fact check this," because it was just like that's fucking retarded. There's absolutely zero reason why you should think that. And I was like, oh god. And but I've been running with it for a year at that time, and getting my meals together for that was a rabid pain in the ass. So yeah, it's
Yeah,
true that you can just pick up on something because there is a need for framework. Like we need some sort of structure, and sometimes the first thing you get is better than nothing. And you just run with it.
I think one of my favorite things is, um, when you get someone to realize what they said,
Mm.
and how to like try and talk someone out of something that they said, not in a way of like being like, hey, this is how you're wrong, but
Right.
just be like, hey, if what you said was supposedly true, then this would also have to be true.
Totally.
And then you make that whatever that thing was, kind of ridiculous. So like for what you said about the 25 grams of protein, I've had this conversation with someone over the internet before where I was like, okay, well, Hafthor Bjornsson was 440 pounds when he pulled the 500 kilogram deadlift. You're telling me that if he was eating 1 gram of protein per pound, that he was having something like 16 meals a day
Jesus.
of 25 grams of protein. And now remember, these each had to be separated by a 2-hour window or whatever. Otherwise, you wouldn't.
The
I was like,
window, yeah.
I'm in the day. Like, you know, it's just it's funny when you start breaking things down, and then you realize, you know, the average person, like if you take someone in middle school, right? Some middle school boy who's 110 pounds soaking wet in 5th grade, aka me. If you took me in middle school, yeah, I probably could only digest 20 to 30 grams of protein in a meal and actually utilize it, because that's 30% of my daily amount of protein. But if you take, you know, me now, where, you know, I have all this extra muscle mass compared to then, still small, but comparatively, you know, like I can utilize so much more because there's so much more places it can go, right?
Absolutely. Demand is just higher. Yeah.
And so I think just by like, you know, like you didn't have to go down into any kind of like physiology or anatomy to rationalize that argument, right? You just had to, you know, take something that someone says and then just apply it to the most extreme example and see if it holds true. And then I think a lot, and granted that definitely it's a two-edged sword, right? Because they can,
you can straw man pretty quick by that.
Yeah, you can absolutely straw man. So that's
get out of
exactly
hand.
what I'm talking about is straw manning someone. But hey, how to troll on Twitter, you know?
Yeah, internet wars are won.
Yeah, internet wars are won via the keyboard, right?
Whatever it takes.
Keyboard warrior. Shout out Landon. But yeah, did you see that whole thing?
I did see that post. I talked to him a little bit about it too.
Yeah, that was goofy. Obviously, most people who are listening have no idea what we're referring to, but one kind of influential person on Instagram kind of posted this thing about obesity being completely on the person who is obese. Like it's totally their fault. And I'm sure we both have opinions about this. I'm of the opinion, I used to think that way. I used to be like, oh, you know, you're fat because it's your fault because you can't stop eating. But the farther into the dietetics program that I got, the more I realized that, one, that's probably not the case. There are genetic factors. There's socioeconomic factors. And then on top of that, like I know, like there are dietitians that still think tomatoes make you fat, you know, and these are the people we're supposed to be listening to. You know what I mean? Well, what's your take on it? Do you think like it's completely on the individual and that's the whole reason they're obese? Or do you think there's too many factors to put shame on somebody?
Sure. I think I kind of have to separate it out for myself. The first thing I would say outright is that speaking to someone in that way is generally not going to get you any sort of result. Negative punishment and punishment as a learning style needs to be immediate. It needs to be incredibly harsh, and it needs to be very consistent. And those are 3 things that are really hard to do and have people want to talk to you. And they're hard to do with animals, to say that, you know, positive reinforcement is the way to go if you want to have behavioral changes and kind of conditioning. So from a coaching standpoint or speaking with your friends or your family and people you care about, going that route is going to get you nowhere. We've attempted to use shame for drugs, for sex, for economic factors, for everything, and had very little results with it. There's no reason obesity is going to be any different. So I think as a whole, as an industry, we should just stick that in the closet. But in terms of an actual kind of cause and effect, when thinking about these sort of more so the socioeconomic factors, these correlative instances of things are really hard for us to parse out and say this is why. You know, I have 2 years of background in biochemistry, so I have like a very surface level. I need something still very broad stroked to kind of there's no ability for me to understand nuance. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
so, is it worth it for me to think about the difference between correlation and cause if I'm wanting to kind of be self-reflective and internal and think that, oh, well, I grew up in a neighborhood with low um, access to grocery stores, generally was convenience stores and stuff like that. And this is why I've developed these food habits. But because of that, now I can only eat these types of foods. That's not the case for sure. So there's a really hard kind of, it's something that's difficult for me to parse out because I'm vehemently against telling someone that you're fat because you're lazy or you're
Yeah.
fat because you're weak or anything silly like that. But there is definitely, as far as a cause is concerned, like unless you were force fed, then in some manner, then you have a responsibility there. But I think the way that you get to that ownership is for most people not going to be that sort of extreme ownership of taking it all on yourself. And there's nothing wrong too with being like, oh, hey, like I have a really bad sweet tooth because I always had sodas with my dinners with my parents and my family, and those are happy memories. And when I eat, that makes me feel good after work because I'm being stressed. That's something that you shouldn't be feel shame for admitting. And then maybe need to have alterations, have a diet soda, have some
Mhm.
fruit that's sweet, or whatever, things like that. If that makes sense, I kind of rabbit trailed a little bit, but I
No, no.
both agree.
I
And I was
totally
talking to Brandon about this, or Landon, excuse me, Landon. God, I call him Brandon all the time on campus. Uh, yeah,
I'm sure he loves that. He probably doesn't even
yeah.
correct you either. He's like, hi.
No, when he was in the library, it's just kind of quiet, and I could just kind of muffle it. When you start saying something, you just kind of just spit it out. But shit, I lost where I was going.
Well, we were talking about, I mean, you were kind of leading into like how shame isn't the way to go when it comes with, when it
Oh,
comes,
right. Yeah, I would say this is a classic question of when does a pile stop being a pile? If you have a pile standing in front of you, start picking grains off, at what point is it no longer a pile? And I think the same thing is kind of being applied here in a causative sense that we're having about kind of obesity. At what point do you draw the line? And is that a valuable thought experiment to have? Probably not. So maybe it's not worth kind of um, figuring out when to start blaming yourself and maybe to start kind of looking at factors and separate them from you and start looking for things that give a positive reinforcement to your or to build habits and behaviors, stuff like that. Because if you just wanted to go down the rabbit hole of what's your fault, you got a lot of things in your life for sure that are messed because of you, and not just us as in the physique realm, but lots of varying avenues because we're all flawed people. We're all of us are subject to some sort of lack in some way. So sometimes it's not worth even to get down into that hole, but more so start looking at factors for future behavior. I feel like somewhat if that's something that you can have. I'm really into denying free will. Aesthetically, I say it more aesthetically than philosophically because it's something that is more so an overall like kind of like representation of like being in the world to me than it is like an actual like this is how the world works because that's not really my place in my field of academics. I think that's probably going to be owned by physics at some point in the next 10 or 20 years. But maybe it is worth considering at some point that what things are you like that you will never have the power to change. There's lots of things, but I bet you it's not your body. I bet you have a lot more autonomy than you want to believe. But it's hard to feel that way. I mean, women especially, there's lots of things to get in on that. But body commodification as a whole, Instagram influencers, or even we who sell our bodies for time. Otherwise, there isn't a feeling of kind of containment and ownership towards it. So I can see why there's a lot of factors to not to go on one side of the extreme or the other. Not to be cliche, but you probably have to kind of mediate between. Depends on people too. I don't know if you've had clients like this, but I certainly have friends and academics where negativity about a thing is their driver, and they want to be told that they're lazy and that whatever they have isn't good enough because it makes them want to go out and do it more. And there's a lot of factors that kind of lead into that, but not everyone's like that.
yeah, I don't, I, first off, I largely agree with everything you just said. I think, especially when we're talking about obesity as a global problem, especially an American problem, we can't we can't blame it on the individual, because when has blaming on the individual ever really helped anything? You know, like what, like you see it in like politics and stuff. You tell someone that the reason they, you're the reason that this is wrong with
Right.
whatever. It's like they won't even have a conversation with you after that. So that's clearly not the choice, regardless if it's true or not. So the question then becomes, how do I approach this conversation with someone? And first off, you shouldn't ever approach someone who's obese and be like, hey, you're obese, you want to talk about it? Like, no, that's like,
Yeah,
that's fucking dumb.
I bet you they
But
have lots of things to talk about
yeah,
themselves.
I
Very
bet you're going
interesting,
to make
not their
a
body.
lifelong friend right
Yeah.
now. But I mean, like, the thing that irks me is that you hear people say yeah, all, and I am guilty of this. I will be the first to admit it. Like, losing weight is calories in, calories out. You can't deny thermodynamics, and that's true. That is the overarching theme
I've
of
said
how
that
you have to lose weight.
lazy statement too. Yeah.
But you look at something like a really successful business like Precision Nutrition, for example. They John Berardi was the founder of them, and they focus more on behavior change than they do on actually like focusing on the kinds of things that I do. Like, we talk about macronutrients and nutrient dense foods and stuff like that. But that's because like the bar to entry for like a personal training / coaching client, generally speaking, the people I work with have, been around, been around people who are at least somewhat knowledgeable in food, somewhat knowledgeable in training. So like the bar is higher. But
Yeah, the language we're used to is that indeed
yeah,
this topic. Yeah.
and there is like, you can ask literally any person in the gym, how do you lose weight? And they're like, oh yeah, dude, all you gotta do is eat less calories than you burn. It's like,
Right.
yes, that's very straightforward.
Cool.
But when someone's like, when someone approaches you, has been like, I've been trying to lose weight, but I'm super tired, I have no energy, I have no sex drive, my significant other hates me, like I hate my job, and I hate my body. Do you think the best response to be like, oh, dude, you just got to eat less? Like, that's what? Like, how is that helping anyone? Like, that doesn't make any chunk of sense, no matter which way you throw it, right?
For sure.
And
And
it's
there's
one
a
of
lot
those
of
things.
nuance to eat less too. Food choices, for instance, timing, all those things. There's a lot to be said about just eating less.
Mm-hmm. And it's like, yes, at the end of the day, you do have to, eat less. You do have to move more, right? You have to do those things in order to cause the weight loss. But, we're also not teaching people how to like live at maintenance, or how not to gain weight is like a really good thing you could probably teach someone and I mean, like, obviously me and you aren't going to be the people teaching this sort of thing. Like, if I got an obese client, it would be something I would teach. But people who are looking to work with me tend to be someone who are pretty physique driven, pretty strength driven, and generally the bar to entry to those things is they've already kind of got a few things together. Not always, but most of the time. So I don't tend to work with people who are super new to this sort of thing, or have zero knowledge. And what's the other interesting thing is like realizing, kind of checking your biases in terms of obesity. I was really lucky where my mom is like one of the fittest people on the planet as far as I'm concerned. She's in her 60s and still running triathlons, and she'll do like century bike rides, and she ran the Boston Marathon last year, and maybe it was last year. And so like, and she's like 61, it's like I clearly grew up in an environment where obesity was not on my radar. You know what I mean? It wasn't a thing in my family. You look at my whole family, they're all, for the most part healthy. You know what I mean? Especially my mom, especially me and my brother. My dad's always been really physically active. So I got really lucky in that upbringing. But it's like, you can't blame the kid who is 13 years old and 200 pounds that it's his fault.
Totally. Yeah, for sure.
Like, because that was never a problem for me. If anything, I struggled gaining weight growing up because I was so active.
Mm.
My mom didn't let us watch TV. She was like, you have to go play outside for like, until it gets dark, and you can come in, watch the Colbert Report, and go to sleep. Like that's what it was until I was 14 and got my first, touch screen iPod Touch first generation that was a hand down from a friend of mine,
Nice.
and finally I had what was the Tech Deck game on the iPhone? When you had the
I never
skateboard,
played that.
it was dumb anyway, but I would play that for hours because it was like my first like ability to play. Anyway, that's totally tangential, but I'm just saying that you are born into this situation that you didn't sign up for it, right?
Yeah.
You kind of get the cards you're dealt and you're trying to play with the best hand you can. But some people did not get pocket aces. I got pocket aces. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, everyone's cards are different, and treating everyone like they got the same hand as you is just not the way to go about it, as far as I'm concerned.
I agree. I think there's two things I would say about that. I think the first one, to the point you just made, is that this search for homogeneity is extremely destructive. And there's a very significant strain of literature that attempts to discuss the rise in the conditions that led to World War II and Nazi Germany as that kind of quest for homogeneity that extends itself and continues into areas of science and economic factors, where we're trying to figure out these standard deviations and pin things to this one normalcy. And then if you're outside of those ranges, you need to be punished and brought back into those things. I think there's instances where that's probably good and instances where there's not. And the second thing, as part of the broader thing, because I'm sure there's, well, if anyone listens to this, hello people, if you do, there may be someone who's like, fuck these guys. They have an inability to take ownership, and they're preaching something that allows people to kind of be destructive or be self-destructive towards that and blame it on someone else. But something that I kind of have with people, or something I bring up as an example that sometimes lands the mark and sometimes doesn't, is just thinking about words. How do you know a word, and why do you use a word the way that you use a word? Because if I show you a picture of a tree, let's say actually that's a thought experiment, you don't know any words at all, and you have no idea of what language is, and you go somewhere that suddenly has it, and now you are learning it, right? You have these conditions that allow you not to be absolutely fried from never having talked to anyone before. Now someone's teaching you. Let's say they point to a tree and they say X. Well, is X the tree? Is X the bark? Is X that type of tree? Is X that leaf? You don't know, and you actually can't know until later on someone points to something else and says Y, and you create a difference between X. You know about the difference because of someone else showing you that difference, and now you start to use X and maybe use it a little less broadly. You're only referring to a leaf, but it's a very particular type of leaf, and now you have X to the second. For whatever reason, this is how that language works, for God's sakes. And you have these eternal, never-ending strings of differences that then make up what this word is for you and why you use it. What to me and what to you, if you can think of any, hit me, is the difference for behavior as a whole, but outcome and difference, right? You want outcomes that are different from other ones, and how did you learn what those outcomes are? Mm-hmm. So, even though there is an ownership to recognizing your outcome isn't what you want, the maybe the path or the difference that you were taught previously, wasn't accurate, right? You're approaching things improperly. So maybe ownership can be taken there, but for how you learned it, the same, stupid thing I had about 25 grams of protein, it's my fault for believing that sort of thing, but it fit into an overarching framework of difference that allowed me to have a way to act in the world for a supposed outcome. Even recently, I had the whole leucine pool, where shooting for 3 grams. I just watched the food timing and macronutrients from Dr. Mike, and he was giving some good theoretical arguments for, because of the rates of digestion, the fact that there probably isn't ever these big spikes and lows, and you probably have a usual even keel. And so there's something to be considered about the pool, but it might not be as great as we thought. And I was like, oh my God, I've been believing this and shooting for, I look at my grams of leucine on my chronometer app for each meal, and I make sure I've been making sure it hits 3. I'm still making sure it goes, 2.53 somewhere in there, but I'm not looser about it now. And I believed it for a long period of time because there was difference between 1 gram of leucine and 3 to me, and my outcome was for 3. So I apply it. Sorry, I kind of rabbit trailed a little bit on that, but I try and apply that a lot with people. Apply that a lot with people because there's a lot of things that require social certification. Knowledge oftentimes is certified. The knower is certified by a broader institution of people, academics or your friend group, or your religion that describes your morality or whatever else. Like there's things that are certifying knowledge for you, and there's no reason I think to believe that the habits, behaviors, and outcomes or things that lead to the outcome of obesity are any different. But maybe I'm overgeneralizing.
I don't know. I think you brought up. I really liked your, even though we went down the rabbit hole, I really liked your analogy of the. Well, I guess it's not an analogy. Anyway, I really liked how you went into that whole idea about someone. You could even just take it into consideration as moving to a country that does not share a single word or word phrase that even sounds like you. Like if we went China, for example, like none of our structures are like thing we like. I know what that's called in my language, but I couldn't even guess what you would call it, right?
Absolutely.
And like the way they structure sentences, the way their words look, like none of it is similar, right? So I think that's a really interesting take, because you take someone who, maybe they grew up in, you look at the hot spots for obesity, like Alabama or something, they grew up in this area where, they might not have even known someone who was like, food conscious. They might have known people who were somewhat lean because they were really active, like the football player on their high school team or something, but they ate the same things. They just happened to be lifting weights and moving all the time, and that being in conjunction with being 16 to 18 years old, where your metabolism is just firing all the time because you're growing, like that, you can get away with a lot. But then you put them in a place like, we're actually lucky where we both live in Bozeman and Missoula. There is such a health oriented aspect in where we live. And I think people forget that they surround themselves with people who tend to think the same. And I forget and have to reground myself that not everyone knows all this stuff about nutrition and training, from time to time. And realizing that if you were to take the average person, not the average athlete, but the average just American in general, if you were to take them and ask them what they know about nutrition and training, it's like, it would be so upsetting to me, because obviously this is like what I want to make my livelihood, right? It would just be like, how can you like not even like put these things together? And like it's like putting one and one together and getting two. It's easy, but like for them it's like putting tree and dog together and getting sky. You know what I mean? It's like it's irrelevant. It's a different language. You know what I mean? And it's not straightforward. And that's why, to me, it's like the whole idea of just telling people to eat less and move more. It's like, well, do I eat less salad and eat more peanut butter?
Yeah,
it's like,
exactly.
that's they people know that fruits and vegetables are good for you, but people don't know that, like bananas are way more calorie dense than berries. Like these are not things that most people just generally know, or that like you don't have to go absolutely kill yourself on a Stairmaster for 45 minutes. You could just go on a nice walk around the park with your dog a couple times a day. Like they are going to get you the same result, but people just like don't realize it, and we can't blame these people for not having that knowledge when, we're overcomplicating it as a fitness industry.
Absolutely.
Right?
And gatekeeping it, being rude or obstinate towards it. Like, how do you not know that? Like, because it's easy to get in that mindset, for sure. But why should they know that? Why have we ever had to think about food in the developed world? We haven't. And the way we think about it is very privileged. That's a word someone's going to hate that I use.
It's true.
So I agree, and but it's easy to get in those ruts, because the same things I think that breed that like desire, press, discipline. I'm so hardcore that I can tell you that you're weak. I think is infected in a lot of physique sports, of what physique sports are, unfortunately. And they, I'm sure there's tendencies that I express or thoughts that I have that derive from that place that I'm not aware of that are unhealthy. So I'm not surprised that we tend to get in those trains of thought as a group of people, right? As a hobbyist. But I totally agree with you. They're unhelpful. They're unhealthy, and they're counterproductive, I think, in the long run, towards what if you profess to be wishing to give people the tools for success in fitness. I think they're unproductive to what you're hoping for. Like whatever the gentleman's looking for on an Instagram post where he told people that it was your fault. But maybe his brand of followers like that, and he got more followers because of it.
Probably. I think especially when you're looking at like, the hardcore crowd, the people who, are into, and don't get me wrong, me and you are in the hardcore crowd. I just like to think we have at least a few people in our life who are keeping us. I'm not going to say they're not grounded, but that like for anyone listening who doesn't know me personally, which I am going to admit is probably not super likely at this point, but
not yet. Not yet.
Not yet. Hopefully,
They'll go back in the archives 20 years from now. Yeah.
Yeah, and be like, oh my God, this started the whole thing. That would be cool. But my girlfriend Cam, she keeps me super grounded. Because I'm, like so deep into this, fitness space, and then I come home and like Cam doesn't like going to the gym. And like I don't blame her for not liking it. It's especially if you've like I got introduced to going to the gym when I was like 12. So like, for me, it's a super comfortable place, but people don't realize that's not what it's like for 99% of people walking in for the first time. They like when I see those videos and I'm totally guilty of this, but being like, oh, how do you use a machine that wrong? It's like, they've never seen one before in their life. It's like putting a toddler in a motorcycle and being like, get to the next town. It's like they don't know.
I'm so guilty of that for sure. Oh God, the amount of times we're in the workout, you're all pumped up, you're tired or whatever, and someone's doing something you think is silly, and you're like, "What a fucking idiot!" And afterwards, I have to feel bad, or I should feel bad about having thought that. For exactly like you said, like they're already not comfortable potentially, but no one showed them anyways. This is new for them. Like, why should they know how to use it? It's super easy to get kind of full of yourself. And I actually just recently, because Chelsea, my wife, does the same thing for me, where she has to ground me. And I tend to be very extreme about things and want to take things very far, and tend to apply those expectations to other people improperly and think that there's some sort of standard and all those sorts of things. She absolutely has to work to pull me back towards being grounded and not being a pompous asshole with these expectations that I have. And I think it's really easy to feed those expectations, and that's a normal way to think in this fitness sphere with what gets posted by people like that. And I don't want to just hate on this guy for having that thought, because I think it's a legitimate thought with legitimate concerns. And that's why we've been talking about it for so long, is because it is a meaningful statement. There's meaning behind it, so to speak. But I think it's definitely a part of a broader trend of being really far up your ass that can get you in places and outcomes with people you don't really want.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I have to just check something real quick, because
I was actually going to wrap it up. I was thinking, because we've been going for an hour and a half. We've been recording. Yeah, it's gone by really quick. And I know you have to like go train and stuff, or you got other stuff going on. I was planning on capping it around an hour, but we hit an hour and we were like just kind of tickling the surface.
Yeah, we just kind of started.
But I feel like we kind of came to a place where it was a good place to wrap up. So
okay.
I just if that's okay with you, I think
I think that's great.
Sweet. I just wanted to say thank you so much for doing this with me, Chris. I really appreciate it. And I would say, where can people find you? But they'll find you on Instagram, because you're jacked.
Yeah, and I don't even post. I don't even have anything of my physique on my like board. I don't know what you'd call it. I do post a lot on my story, because I don't want you to have to look at me for too long.
Well, they can always go to me and see pictures of you. So
my man, I love it. Yeah, I think if you want to see some pretentious music bullshit, you can come follow me on Instagram, and we'll go from there.
Nice. Hell yeah. Sweet. Thank you everybody for listening. I really appreciate it. Once again, this was our first episode. We'll be ironing out some of the little things and moving forward, and hopefully we get to do another one. And Chris, I am definitely going to have you back on, because you're one of my best buddies and you're super interesting.
Appreciate it.
So anyway, I will cut the recording.
I love it. See you, man.